I still remember the way the wind moved that morning. It was cold in a way that didn't bite, just settled on your skin like a quiet warning. The kind of cold that makes you pull your jacket tighter without thinking about it. I was standing near the gate at Camp Pendleton, holding a paper cup of coffee that had already gone lukewarm, watching the early light spill over the gravel. I'd been a civilian instructor on that base for almost 9 years. Logistics mostly. Boring paperwork, schedules, the kind of work nobody notices unless something goes wrong. But that morning, I'd been pulled in to observe a joint exercise. Something about cross-training. Something about a Navy SEAL detachment running a precision shooting evaluation alongside a few selected Marines. I didn't think much of it when I walked in. Then I saw her. She was maybe 5'4", slim. Brown hair pulled back tight under a faded green cap. Her name tape read Aryan NER. She was standing off to the side, alone, a rifle case at her feet, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets. She looked younger than the rest of them, not in a fragile way. Just quiet. Like she'd been quiet for a long time and learned to be comfortable in it. The men around her were laughing about something. Big shoulders, big voices. The kind of guys who fill a room before they even speak. I counted 6 SEALs near the range building, all of them moving with that easy confidence that comes from doing dangerous things for a living. One of them, a tall guy with a sunburned neck, glanced at her and elbowed the man next to him. "That her," he said, not bothering to keep his voice down. The other one snorted. "That's the one they sent, you sure?" "Has to be, nobody else here." The first guy laughed. "Man, somebody's playing a joke on us." She didn't move, didn't even turn her head. She just kept looking out at the range, her jaw set, her breath coming slow and steady, like she'd heard it before, like she'd heard it 100 times before. I felt something tighten in my chest. I don't know why. Maybe because I'd seen that look on people who'd given up trying to explain themselves. Maybe because she reminded me of my own sister, who used to stand at the back of every classroom we walked into, never raising her hand even when she knew the answer. A staff sergeant came out of the building with a clipboard. He called names. When he got to hers, he looked up like he wasn't sure he'd read it right. "Renner." "Here, Staff Sergeant." Her voice was lower than I expected, calm, almost flat. She bent down, picked up her rifle case, and walked toward the line without looking at anyone. The SEALs watched her go. One of them muttered something I couldn't catch. Another one laughed. That's when the commander showed up. I'd heard about him before. Commander Hale, 22 years in. 2 combat tour nobody was allowed to talk about. The kind of man who walked into a room and the temperature seemed to drop 2 degrees. He wasn't tall, but he carried himself like he was. Gray at the temples, eyes that didn't move when he looked at you. He had this habit of standing very, very still, and somehow that stillness was the loudest thing about him. He nodded at the staff sergeant and walked the line, checking each shooter. When he got to her, he stopped. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then quietly, "You're Renner." "Yes, sir." He looked at her case, looked at her, looked back at the case. "Where'd they pull you from?" "Marksmanship unit, sir, Quantico." He nodded once, just once, then kept walking. I remember thinking, he doesn't believe she belongs here either. The tall SEAL, the one with the sunburned neck, walked up to her while she was setting out her gear. He had this grin on his face, friendly on the surface, mean underneath. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, "you sure you got the right range? Pistol qualifications are over by Building 4. She didn't look up. "This is the right range." "Yeah," he glanced at his buddy who was already smirking. "You ever shoot past 300 meters? She kept unpacking, slow, methodical. She was laying out her bipod, her data book, a small black notebook with the corners worn soft from use. "A few times," she said. He laughed. "A few times, hear that, Marco? She shot past 300 a few times." The other guy laughed too, loud, performative, the kind of laugh meant to be heard. "Look," the tall one said, leaning down a little, dropping his voice into that fake helpful tone men use when they want to humiliate someone politely. "I'm just saying, this is gonna be a long day. Maybe sit this one out. Watch how it's done. No shame in it." She finally looked up at him. I was maybe 20 feet away. I could see her eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't anything, really, just steady, like still water on a windless day. "I appreciate the concern," she said. "I'll manage." He raised his eyebrows, mock impressed. Okay, killer, have it your way." He walked off, shaking his head, already telling the joke to someone else before he'd even gotten back to his buddies. I heard the word sniper thrown around like it was hilarious. Heard one of them say, "What is she, 5 feet tall? She'd disappear behind the rifle." The wind picked up a little. A flag near the tower started snapping. She knelt down behind her position and started checking her optic. Her hands were small but steady. She didn't rush. She didn't slow down for show either. She just worked. The way somebody works when they've done a thing 10,000 times and it's become as natural as breathing. I shifted my weight. My coffee was cold now, I didn't care. Commander Hale walked back down the line. He stopped behind her again, watched her for maybe 10 seconds. She didn't acknowledge him. She didn't have to. She was dialing her scope, adjusting for the wind, reading something in that little black notebook. He moved on without a word. The staff sergeant climbed up onto the small wooden tower at the head of the range. He had a bullhorn in one hand, a stopwatch in the other. "Listen up," he called. "Cold bore 1 round, 600 meters, 10-inch steel. Then we move to 800, then 1,000. 2 rounds at each station after the cold bore. You miss, you're out. Shooters ready." A chorus of yes, Staff Sergeant. She just nodded. "On my mark." The whole line settled. You could feel it. That hush that comes over a range right before the first shot. Even the wind seemed to drop for a second, like the world was holding its breath. The tall SEAL, the one who'd mocked her, was 3 positions to her left. He had a rifle that looked like it cost more than my car. Custom stock. Custom optic. He was lying behind it like a man who'd done this in a magazine photo shoot once. I glanced back at her. She'd settled in, her cheek on the stock, her finger off the trigger, breathing slow, her eyes half closed like she was listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. "Stand by," the staff sergeant called. A pause. "Mark." The first shot went off 2 positions down, then another, each one a flat, hard crack that bounced off the hills behind us. She didn't fire yet. The tall SEAL fired. I heard the steel ping out at 600 meters, faint but clear. He grunted in satisfaction, said something to himself that I couldn't hear. Still she didn't fire. The staff sergeant looked over. He was about to say something. Then she fired. 1 shot clean. The recoil barely moved her. A second later, a ping drifted back from the steel. Not loud, but unmistakable. She didn't react. She just ran the bolt slow and settled back in. The staff sergeant scribbled something on his clipboard. The tall SEAL turned his head slightly. I couldn't see his face from where I was standing, but I saw his shoulders tense, just for a second. Then he looked away. They moved to 800 meters. 2 rounds. She fired the first one without seeming to take any time at all. The steel sang, then the second. The steel sang again. I heard someone down the line whisper, "Damn." The wind was picking up now. I could feel it on the back of my neck. A flag down by the 1,000-meter berm was snapping hard, almost sideways. That kind of crosswind is brutal at distance. It pushes a bullet 6, 8, 10 inches off line if you don't read it right. I'd watched grown men miss 1,000-meter targets by 3 feet in wind like that. The line moved to 1,000. The tall SEAL took his first shot. A miss. The bullet kicked up dust about a foot left of the steel. He swore under his breath, adjusted, fired again. Hit barely, the steel rang weakly. He looked pleased anyway, glanced over at his buddies who gave him a thumbs up. Then it was her turn. I watched her for a long time, longer than felt comfortable. She was just lying there perfectly still, breathing slow. The wind tugged at her sleeve. She didn't adjust, didn't move. Then she fired. Ping! Center mass, loud, the steel rocked on its chain. A few people looked up from their notes. She ran the bolt. Fired again. Ping! Same spot. The steel rocked harder this time, almost lifting off its hook. Now everybody was looking. The staff sergeant lowered his clipboard slowly. He stared down the line at her position like he wasn't sure what he just watched. Commander Hale, who had been standing near the tower with his arms folded, took 2 steps forward. Just 2, then stopped. The tall SEAL didn't look at her. He was staring at his own rifle like it had betrayed him. Cease fire on the line, the staff sergeant called. His voice was a little louder than it needed to be. Stand by for next stage. People started murmuring, quietly at first, the kind of murmur that happens when something has shifted and nobody wants to be the first to say so. I heard one of the SEALs, a younger one with a red beard, lean over to the man next to him. Who is she? The other one shrugged, no idea. I felt my coffee cup crinkle in my hand. I'd been squeezing it without realizing. She was already adjusting her scope, reading her notebook, calm as a Sunday morning. The staff sergeant cleared his throat into the bullhorn. Next stage, 1,200 meters. 1 round cold bore, then 1,500, 2 rounds. Wind is gusting at 12 to 15 left to right. Adjust accordingly. Shooters on my mark. 1,200 meters is where most people start to fall apart. The bullet's still supersonic, but barely. The wind has more time to work on it. Your math has to be perfect. Your breathing has to be perfect. Your trigger pull has to be perfect. I watched the tall SEAL settle in. He was sweating a little. I could see it on the back of his neck. He fired. A miss way left, almost 2 feet off. He cursed, loud this time. His buddy 3 positions over fired, miss high and right. The young SEAL with the red beard fired. Hit, but it was a glancing one, edge of the plate. Then her turn. She didn't rush. She never rushed. She just breathed. I noticed her finger move to the trigger so slowly it looked like it wasn't moving at all. Crack. A long pause, longer than I expected, long enough that I started to think she might have missed. Then faint, from 1,200 meters out. Ping. Dead center, the steel jumped. Someone behind me said, Jesus Christ. The staff sergeant lowered his bullhorn. He looked over at Commander Hale. Hale didn't move. Hale was just staring downrange like he was trying to figure out a math problem. She ran the bolt. The line moved to 1,500 meters. Now 1,500 meters, that's a different animal. That's the kind of distance where the curvature of the Earth starts to matter, where the bullet drops 30, 40 feet from its line of departure, where the wind can carry it 3, 4, even 5 feet off course in a strong gust, where most professional shooters need a spotter calling corrections in their ear. She didn't have a spotter. The tall SEAL had one, so did his buddy, so did the red-bearded guy. She didn't. She was just lying there, alone, reading the wind off the flags and the dust, and the way the grass moved at the base of the berm. The staff sergeant called the command. The tall SEAL fired first. Miss by a lot. He fired again. Miss. He slammed his palm flat on the dirt next to his rifle. His spotter was whispering something fast and urgent in his ear. He waved the spotter off. Other shooters down the line fired. Some hit. Most missed. 2 of them missed both rounds and were out. Then it was her turn. She lay there for a long time, maybe 40 seconds. The wind shifted twice. The flag down by the berm flapped, then sagged, then flapped again. She breathed. She fired. The crack of the rifle was sharp. The whole line tensed. A heartbeat. 2. 3. Ping. Dead center. She ran the bolt without lifting her head. The wind shifted again, stronger this time. The flag down the range was straight out, hard left to right. She waited. The wind held. She fired. Ping. Same spot. The steel was rocking so hard now that the chain holding it was singing. For a moment, nobody moved. Then somebody, I think it was the staff sergeant, said, very quietly, "That's 2 for 2. I looked at the tall SEAL. He was lying behind his rifle, perfectly still, staring straight ahead. Not at his target, not at her, just straight ahead. His buddy hadn't said anything in a while. Commander Hale finally moved. He uncrossed his arms. He took 3 slow steps forward until he was standing almost directly behind her position. He didn't speak. She didn't look up at him. She was already pulling her bolt back, checking the chamber, doing whatever it is shooters do between strings of fire. Her hands were as steady as they'd been an hour ago, maybe steadier. The staff sergeant's voice came back over the bullhorn, and even through the static, I could hear that it was different now. Tighter. Final stage, 1,800 meters. 1 round. Unknown distance from this position, no laser, eyeball only. Wind is variable. Shooters, you have 90 seconds to range, dope, and fire. On my mark. 1,800 meters. A mile basically, a little over. Without a laser rangefinder. I heard someone behind me suck in a breath. The tall SEAL spotter was already on his rangefinder, then realized halfway through that he wasn't supposed to use it, and dropped it like it had burned him. Down the line, men were squinting through their optics, doing math in their heads, whispering to themselves. She wasn't. She was just lying there, looking through her scope. Her lips moved once very slightly like she was counting something, then she stopped. She wrote something in her notebook, 1 short line, then she closed it. She put her cheek on the stock. And she waited for the mark. The staff sergeant's voice cracked through the bullhorn. Mark. The clock started. 90 seconds. For a moment the whole range was nothing but the wind, the flags snapping, the faint hum of a generator somewhere behind the tower, the crunch of someone's boots shifting in the gravel. Then the line came alive. The tall SEAL was muttering to his spotter. The spotter was shaking his head. The tall SEAL adjusted his scope, hesitated, adjusted it again. His finger hovered near the trigger guard, then pulled back. He was second-guessing himself. I could see it from 20 feet away. His buddy 3 positions over-fired early. Way too early, 40 seconds in. The bullet went somewhere into the dirt, we never even saw where. He cursed. The red-bearded SEAL fired at 60 seconds. A miss. Low and right. The tall SEAL fired at 70. A miss. We didn't see the dust kick. The bullet just disappeared into the distance like it had never existed. 80 seconds. She hadn't moved. The staff sergeant glanced down at his clipboard, then up at her position, then at his stopwatch. 85. She breathed in. 87. She breathed out. 88. Crack. The rifle barked. The wind carried the sound away. Silence. A long silence. I could hear my own heart. I could hear the staff sergeant breathing. I could hear, somewhere far behind me, a bird calling once and then stopping. Then, ping. So faint it almost wasn't there. But it was there. Every single head on that line turned. The staff sergeant looked at his clipboard like he'd forgotten what to write. Then he looked at her. Then he looked at Commander Hale. Hale hadn't moved an inch. His face hadn't changed. But his hands, and this is the part I'll remember until I'm too old to remember anything, his hands had unclenched, slowly, like he hadn't even known he was making fists in the first place. The tall seal pushed himself up onto his elbows. He was staring at her now, not laughing, not smirking, just staring, like he'd never seen her before, like she'd appeared out of thin air. She ran her bolt, slow, steady. The brass casing pinged out onto the mat next to her. She sat up. She brushed dust off her elbow. She didn't smile, she didn't look around. She just started packing her gear. And that's when somebody finally spoke. It was the red-bearded seal. He'd taken off his cap and was running a hand through his hair. He was shaking his head, smiling this stunned, half-disbelieving smile. "Who the hell are you?" he said. She looked up at him, just a glance, polite. "Renner," she said, "like the sign." She tapped her name tape with 2 fingers, then went back to packing. The red-bearded guy laughed, a short, surprised laugh, like he didn't know what else to do. Down the line, the tall seal was getting up. He was brushing dirt off his pants. He didn't say anything. He didn't look at her. He just gathered his things, his face set, and walked off toward the building. His spotter followed half a step behind, talking fast and quiet. The staff sergeant climbed down from the tower. He walked the length of the line slowly, checking shooters, checking the targets through his own spotting scope. When he got to her position, he stopped. He just looked at her. "Renner?" "Yes, Staff Sergeant." "That last shot, 1,800 meters, unknown distance, no laser, what you range it at?" She paused, halfway through closing her rifle case. 1780, she said. He blinked. "How?" She shrugged, a small one, not modest, not proud, just a fact. "The berm has railroad ties along the bottom. I know the standard length. I counted them in the scope, did the math." "You did the math?" "Yes, Staff Sergeant." "In your head?" "Yes, Staff Sergeant." He stared at her for another long second. Then he nodded once, very slowly, and walked off. I watched him go. He stopped near Commander Hale. They spoke for a moment, low, neither one looking at her. Hale's eyes flicked toward her position once, then back to the staff sergeant. He said something short. The staff sergeant nodded. Hale walked away toward the tower. I exhaled. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. She closed her case, zipped it, stood up. She was small, and the rifle case in her hand was almost as long as she was tall. She didn't seem to notice. She started walking back toward the building. That's when the tall seal came back out. He'd been inside for maybe 2 minutes, just long enough to splash water on his face, probably. He came down the steps and stopped at the bottom, blocking her path. She stopped. The line was quiet. Everyone was watching, even though nobody was supposed to be watching. For a long second, he just looked at her. Then he said, "How long have you been shooting?" His voice was different now, lower. The smirk was gone. The mocking edge was gone. There was something raw underneath it that I think surprised even him. She looked up at him. "A while," she said. "How long is a while?" She thought about it. "Since I was 8. He stared. 8. My dad was a competitive shooter. He started me young. Your dad? Yes. What's his name? She paused just for a beat, long enough that I noticed. David Renner. The tall seal's face did something then. It went very still. Then it went a little pale under the sunburn. David Renner, he repeated quietly. Yes. The David Renner who took Wimbledon in '98. Yes. And the King's Cup in 2004. Yes. He swallowed. You're David Renner's daughter. Yes. Oh, he said. Just that, oh. I didn't know who David Renner was at the time. I had to look him up later. He was a legend in the long-range shooting world. The kind of name people whispered at matches. 2-time world champion. Held a record for a 1,000-yard group that hadn't been broken in 15 years.